I was hired to watch an empty house. On the seventh night, someone came home. It was supposed to be the easiest money I'd ever make. $500 for 1 week. No cleaning, no repairs, no pets to feed. Just stay in the house. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Harlow, slid a brass key across the table and said something that still makes my skin crawl. No matter what happens after midnight, don't open the attic door. I laughed. He didn't. Before he left, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a worn manila folder. It looked like it had been opened and closed hundreds of times over the years. "I've had a lot of people quit," he said quietly. "You only need to make it 7 nights." I assumed he meant the place was creepy. I had no idea what he really meant. The house sat alone on the edge of Pine Ridge, surrounded by tall pine trees that seemed to swallow every sound. Even during the afternoon, the property felt darker than it should have. The branches blocked most of the sunlight, and the gravel driveway stretched so far from the road that once you parked, you couldn't even hear passing cars. It wasn't the kind of place you'd call haunted. It was worse. It felt forgotten. The front door groaned as I stepped inside. The air smelled like old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic that I couldn't identify. Everything inside was perfectly arranged. The clocks worked. The curtains were clean. Fresh groceries filled the refrigerator. It looked like someone still lived there. Just someone who hadn't been home for a long time. Mr. Harlow handed me the folder before leaving. Inside were only 3 rules. Rule number 1, never answer the landline. Rule number 2, keep every light on after sunset. Rule number 3, if you hear footsteps in the attic, pretend you didn't. There was no explanation, just those rules. The first 2 nights were almost disappointingly normal. I watched old movies, played games on my laptop, and ordered pizza from the only place that delivered that far out. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every now and then, I'd catch myself staring toward the staircase without realizing it. The silence inside the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, the kind of silence where even swallowing sounds loud. Around midnight, I'd hear tiny creaks above me. Old houses settle. That's what I kept telling myself. By the end of the second night, I was convinced Mr. Harlow was just an eccentric old man who liked strange rules. Then night 3 arrived, at exactly 12:17 a.m. The footsteps started, not random creaks, not mice, actual footsteps, slow, measured, deliberate, like someone pacing from one end of the attic to the other, back and forth, back and forth. Every night, always beginning at exactly the same minute. After several minutes, the footsteps would stop directly above the living room, right above where I was sitting. Then, nothing. I checked every window, every door. Everything stayed locked. There was only one entrance to the attic, a small wooden door at the end of the upstairs hallway. It had 3 deadbolts. 3. Who puts 3 locks on an attic? I remembered the warning. Don't open it. So I didn't. Night 4 changed everything. At exactly 12:17, the footsteps began again. This time they sounded closer, heavier. Then they stopped halfway across the attic. Silence filled the house. A silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. From inside the attic, every hair on my arm stood up. Then a voice, so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Help me." I froze. It sounded like a little girl. I nearly called the police. Instead, I called Mr. Harlow, straight to voicemail. No response. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I searched online for the property. Nothing unusual appeared. No reports, no local ghost stories, no missing people. Everything about the place seemed perfectly ordinary. That somehow made it worse. Night 5. The phone rang. Not my cell phone, the old landline. Its sharp, metallic ring echoed through the empty house. I remembered rule number 1. Never answer. It rang once, twice, 5 times, 10 times. Finally, it stopped. 5 seconds later, it rang again. I unplugged it from the wall. The ringing continued. The cord lay on the floor, disconnected, still ringing. I simply stared at it. Eventually, it stopped. Before relief could set in, the footsteps returned. Only this time they weren't walking. They were running. Fast, desperate, like someone was trying to escape. Then bang! Something slammed against the attic door. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Again, Bang. Again. Bang. The hallway actually shook. I wanted to run outside, but something told me not to. Then, silence. The next morning, I almost quit. $500 suddenly felt like the worst bargain I'd ever made. While packing my bag, I noticed a family portrait hanging near the stairs. Mr. Harlow, his wife, a little girl. Someone had scratched the girl's face completely out of the photograph. Not torn, scratched, over and over again, deep enough to cut through the paper. Curiosity finally got the better of me. I searched every room, every drawer, every cabinet, every closet. Behind a stack of old cookbooks in the kitchen, I found a folded newspaper clipping. 20 years ago, a fire destroyed part of the house. One survivor, Mr. Harlow. His wife and daughter were presumed dead, except one paragraph stood out. Several neighbors claim they continued hearing a little girl screaming from the attic after firefighters declared the house empty. Officials dismissed the reports. I couldn't. I folded the article with trembling hands and looked toward the ceiling. Those footsteps suddenly made horrifying sense. Night 6. I decided I was leaving. I loaded my car, started the engine. Nothing. The battery was completely dead. It had been brand new. My phone showed no signal, not even emergency calls. As I stood in the driveway trying to think, every light inside the house switched off. At once, the entire building disappeared into darkness, except for one thing, a soft yellow light glowing from beneath the attic door. Against every instinct, I walked upstairs. The whisper came again. "Please, he's coming." Then another voice answered, deep, cold, filled with anger. "Don't leave me again." The footsteps exploded across the attic. Something slammed into the door over and over. The deadbolts rattled violently. Wood cracked. One hinge bent outward. I ran downstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, covered my ears. Still, I heard it. Heavy footsteps, stopping directly outside the bathroom door. Then, a single scrape, as if someone slowly dragged their fingernails across the wood. The sounds continued until sunrise. Then, nothing. I decided I wasn't staying another minute. Before leaving, I wanted answers. I drove to the address listed on Mr. Harlow's paperwork. It was a nursing home. The receptionist looked confused. "Mr. Harlow," she frowned. "He passed away last week." I laughed nervously. "No, he hired me." She slowly shook her head. "Impossible." She turned her computer monitor toward me, then showed me his obituary. Date of death, 3 days before I met him. I couldn't breathe. I raced back to the house. Maybe someone had been pretending to be him. Maybe I'd been set up. When I arrived, the front door stood open. Every light was off. Inside, the house was empty. Completely empty. No couch, no television, no refrigerator, no furniture. Nothing. Only dust. It looked abandoned for years. My suitcase, gone. Laptop, gone. The groceries, gone. Everything I'd brought had vanished, as if I'd never been there. I called the police. They searched every room. One officer looked genuinely confused when I kept insisting they check the attic. "There isn't one," he said. I argued. I showed them pictures I'd taken during the week. Except, every single photo showed a perfectly flat ceiling. No attic door, no staircase, nothing. Even the hallway looked different. The place where I'd seen the portrait was just a blank wall. I thought I was losing my mind until 2 weeks later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, me, sleeping on the living room couch, taken from somewhere above me. Written on the back were 7 words. "Thank you for staying until I got home." I turned the photo over again. That's when I noticed them. Standing behind my sleeping body was Mr. Harlow, smiling. Beside him, a little girl, holding his hand. Both of them looked peaceful, relieved. But there was someone else, standing in the attic window, watching all of us. Its face had been scratched out, exactly like the family portrait. I threw the picture into the trash that night. The next morning, it was sitting on my kitchen table. I've burned it, buried it, even mailed it to another state. It always comes back. And every night since then, at exactly 12:17 a.m., I hear slow footsteps directly above my bedroom, even though I live on the top floor of my apartment building, and there is no attic.